Welcome back to the Bentonville Beacon podcast, where we're sharing stories and advice from the entrepreneurs, business executives, and community leaders, sparking the rise of the greater Bentonville area, which represents one of the fastest growing and most dynamic cities and economies in the United States, and is nestled in the Ozark Mountains of Northwest Arkansas in the heartland of America. Hey, I'm your host, James Bell, and it is my pleasure today to introduce you to Zach Springer and Elysia Contreras Springer. They're the co-founders of Gnargo Bike Co, which they founded here in Bentonville in 2022 with the purpose of transforming classic bike frames into advanced electric cargo bikes. Zach, Elysia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, glad to have you. Let's start off with the really easy question. And you two can pick which one goes first, but what would you like the Bentonville Beacon audience to know about you?
Why don't you start?
I'll start ladies first. Well, I'm Elysia, and I am a Minnesota girl. That's where I'm originally from. So I grew up in the suburbs outside of Minneapolis and spent a lot of time in the Twin Cities. I have always been really active. I was an athlete all through high school, played hockey, Minnesota, and soccer, and I was a runner and still am a runner. I kind of transitioned from sport brain to artist brain. Zach and I actually met in art school in Kansas City.
Nice.
So I am technically trained in all things textiles, so sewing, knitting, felting, surface design, you name it. Went back to school for my master's in early childhood education. So a little bit of a change in knowledge and technical skills, but focused on alternative pedagogy and kind of the art studio as the center of learning. So art came back and spent a lot of time in the front lines of infant, toddler, pre-K up to training adults and coaching teachers. So I'm really passionate about education too. I'm a mom. Zach and I both have, well, we have together a son and a daughter. So they're 6.5 and 8. Both go to elementary school in Bentonville here. And what else? One of my favorite things to do with our kids is to dance, just nice. Impromptu in the living room. And our daughter and I are big time T Swift fans. So we do a lot of singing together too.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Very cool. Well, I got to tell you, I've had a few academics on this show, and nobody until today has said pedagogy. I never can pronounce it right. Pedagogy. You know, I've taught before too, and I still can't pronounce the darn word. Awesome. Zach, what about you?
Yeah. So started up in Springfield, Missouri. Lived there until I was about 5. Came down to Bentonville a few times. And then ever since been pretty nomadic. So went from Kansas City to Texas to back to Kansas City, Portland, Minneapolis, Kansas City like 3-4 times. Mm-hmm. But never lived anywhere longer than 6 years, and hoping that Bentonville changes that. Mm-hmm. We love Bentonville. We moved to Bentonville about 4 years ago, with our 2 kiddos because we were living in Minneapolis and absolutely wanted to be outside, and our kids want to be outside, but the weather wouldn't permit it. And so our Gus, our oldest, was amazing at riding a bike. He kind of learned how to walk riding a bike on like a strider. And we came down here for a vacation, and I kind of remembered it from when I was a young guy and just loved it. And we fell in love with it. We ended up getting caught in a snowstorm and deciding that...
Ironic.
Yeah, exactly.
Very much so.
I started writing my resignation letter on that trip and started applying for jobs. And next thing you know, we're moving to Bentonville like 3 or 4 months later.
It was fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sped forward all of my early adolescence there. But I mean... Early on in life, growing up in Springfield, this part of the neck of the woods of the United States, just like getting off the airplane when we came back, it reminded me so much of home, the smell of the air. Mm-hmm. A lot of different characteristics of this area just felt like home. But throughout my career and early life, I moved all around, and I really found community through building things. And like, my dad always built houses, and my mom bought me, instead of getting me a haircut, she got me clippers, and I started cutting my hair when I was, all these like things. I was just always making things. And a bike in my family was going to Walmart and getting a bike, and I wanted a bike I could ride to school reliably. So I ended up buying bikes at garage sales and fixing them, and nice. That's just something I've always really enjoyed doing, is fixing things and bringing them back to life. My mom had an antique booth growing up, so I would get old lighters, like old Zippos, fix them up and make a side hustle at a young age. So that's just kind of who I am. And as in art school, we've met each other and kind of found our purpose in collaborating. And at the time, I was making a canoe to float down the Mississippi River. That was my aspirations. I was going to float from Minnesota to New Orleans.
Nice.
And she helped me make the software, the soft goods of it. The
sleeping bag, tent.
Yep. And the exhibit was much more beautiful than the actual experience, because the experience never happened. I took a road trip to like pregame it, and I talked myself out of that.
Probably
really
a pretty
easily.
good move.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, I really thought you were going to say that that she brought you to your senses. I love that you're all in like, no, I'm going to help you with the soft goods.
Yeah. Well, it was a single
it,
person.
Maybe not.
It was a single person to a single person sleeping bag. So I think she was
I'm like, well,
finding
I don't need
her.
to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Smart. Well, that's really cool. It's funny you got caught here in a snowstorm. And by snowstorm, you mean it snowed 2 inches and it was 30 degrees, not minus 25.
It didn't even snow. It was the really funny thing.
That's hilarious.
We were the interstate was closed due to a ground blizzard, which if you've never heard of this, there's no precipitation. Clear skies. It's the blowing and drifting of the snow that causes the whiteout conditions.
Yep.
And that was actually the first ground blizzard I'd experienced, but we were stuck in Ames, Iowa for 3 days.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I've spent a little time in that part of the country. I lived in Chicago for a little bit. And my sales territory that I had for a medical device company at the time was, the northwest corner of Indiana, the northern, third of Illinois. I had the Quad Cities in Iowa, and the southern part and the eastern part of Wisconsin and the UP. And so
winter.
I discovered winter. Here's what I really discovered, especially in Chicago, was that there's 2 seasons, winter and construction season.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't have to suffer from that here. Okay. Well, Zach, what did Elysia not tell us?
Oh, yeah.
That brag on her.
Yeah.
What did she not tell us that
I
we
didn't
should
hear
know?
anything about her other business that she owns and has grown very well in my eyes on Etsy throughout COVID. So Elysia, do you mind just talking about Regio Baby for a second?
Right. I meant to segue into that after talking about textiles. So it's a handmade sensory toy company called Regio Baby.
Which I've heard of.
You have?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, I've definitely been able to grow in Bentonville. I've got the time and the energy and amazing partners. I mean, we'll talk more about support for entrepreneurs in Northwest Arkansas, I'm sure, in a little bit, but the Amazium has been an amazing partner and collaborator in holding my products in their museum store and having me do workshops there. There's also a couple other little boutique shops across the Midwest, really, that carry some of my products too.
Cool.
But yeah, I've been making those since 2017, really right around when our kids were born was when I was prototyping them in the classroom. So
neat.
An exciting little project that is still going and thriving, and we're kind of on the next plateau of expansion and growth too. So I'm glad you brought that. It's funny how I compartmentalize Gnargo and Regio Baby, but really they're like 2 children that are loved equally.
Of course, right? Well, okay, let's go the other direction. What does Zach not tell us? Is there anything we should know about him that he didn't share?
I feel like he's so humble about what he does and, oh yeah, I make things, but really like he's an expert trained design thinking, like brought on by IDEO, like an amazing problem solver, total jack of all trades. Like he does not give himself enough credit of the skills that he has. Like we would survive the apocalypse for sure, because like he can do anything, he can make it.
Very nice. Well, I'm a huge fan of design thinking, so good for you. Let's talk about Gnargo Bike Company. Will you expand on what Gnargo does and what makes your company and its products so unique?
So Gnargo, what was our tagline? We reimagine your everyday journeys through reinventing classic steel frames. So we're taking an old, that's why we've used the word classic, because old comes with its own rustiness.
Yeah, bad connotation.
Yeah. So we're actually recycling old frames through partners like Pedal It Forward, 816 Bike Collective. We'll talk about them in a little bit, I'm sure. But we're taking frames that would otherwise be landfill bound without use and welding them into a cargo bike frame, adding on a whole new, all the new components, welding on electric stopping power. So we have like the E-kit put on there. What I was saying with welding on the brake tabs, that's the word. You can tell I'm not as much involved in the fabrication, but we're basically recycling old bikes into really amazing modern e-cargo bikes and sourcing locally, which is really incredible, and kind of starting local as well with our customers, but looking to expand regionally and across the country too.
Oh, that's so cool. You mentioned the collaboration with 816 Bike Collective and Pedal It Forward too, right? Will you share how that came about and how that's going?
Sure. So 816 takes us back to about 2006, 2007. So this was in the interdisciplinary arts department at the Kansas City Art Institute. The two main founders of that nonprofit in Kansas City were in the same department as us, and we were kind of there as collaborators, advisors, and we helped with the fundraising so they could get their building in Kansas City. They're still there, operating and thriving, really pretty much strictly on volunteers. They have a kind of different model than Pedal It Forward in that more people come in from the community looking to get a bike, but they're also kind of exchanging man hours, learning how to strip down a bike, rebuild a bike to be able to walk away with a bike. So they're learning, there's an educational component there where they're learning about bikes and how to maintain them, but then they're also getting a bike in the time that they put in.
And knowing how to maintain them throughout the lifetime of them, which is really a cool like empowerment piece of the 816 Bike Collective. It's, I think, a model that's really familiar throughout community bike shops across the United States. There's 240 community bike shops across the United States. Pedal It Forward and 816 are two of the 240. But Pedal It Forward's model is different. I mean, they do wholesale. I think having they have a great partnership with Walmart. They get a lot of like the distribution center channel damages, and they're able to repair those super quickly and get them out to the community. And they do it in bulk, which is just amazing. They're moving thousands of units where 816 might move 8,000 units. And so it's different ways to run a community bike shop. But what it's taught us, I think, is that within each of these community bike shops is access to a really deep part of each of these areas in the United States, where it's not the people that you might find at like your normal bike shop, but it's the people that are truly the advocates of cycling. And if we can have those people as the Gnargo advocates throughout the United States, it fosters this grassroots mentality that we've started here across the United States. And it's happening in Kansas City, which is really inspirational. And I think Minneapolis might be next, or Little Rock, but growing out to those more community bike shops is the scaling path for Gnargo. And it's really exciting.
Man, that's neat. Every time I think about Pedal It Forward, I think I should go over there and help.
You should
put some bikes together. First of all, just selfishly, so I can learn how to work on
Absolutely.
my own bike. Yeah, it would be a really good experience. I mean, that's neat. You get to basically learn how to work on your bike and give back at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
not terrible.
It's a win.
Yeah. So Gnargo's a family business. So I have to ask, how does being a family business work for you, and has it in any way shaped or changed the culture and value of your family?
Big time. I mean, I laugh because we were joking about, well, let's just look at the actual footprint of our house right now, because we're still manufacturing out of the home, and there's a lot of bikes in our house.
They're cargo bikes too. Yeah. Cargo bikes are big. They're about 1.5 times bigger than a normal bike. Mm-hmm. And our house is the normal size house.
So it's a lot of shimmying around and making sure that the one bike is still in the same place it is when the lights go out. But
I think that it's good that it keeps us constantly working on them, and customers are getting their bikes within 6 weeks right now.
Right.
So it's not like, it's like constantly turning, which is cool too. We have movable furniture. I think that's nice. Yeah.
Well, I think so. Something that is actually really valuable out of this is when it really became a business. I think a major shift in just the family and production and all of that was, one, we now have customers that we're serving, and two, we have employees that we have hired. And cool. Our kids are still, it's their house, so they're having these amazing interactions with people fabricating bikes. Gus the other week was out in the garage with Cooper, just taking apart cranks and shining them up and cleaning them up and coming up with well, what could I make this with? Because these were parts that we wouldn't be using in our bikes. So he's getting to be really creative. And I think that's something we've fostered since they were babies, is what can we make instead of what can we buy? How can we fix it? How can we build it ourselves? That's something that has definitely carried on, and they totally get that. But now there's more people that can share that with them. There's more education. It's really cool.
What a neat experience. Every child should be exposed in that way, right? Mm-hmm. Should have those experiences. I'm jealous. I wish I had that experience as a child. I'll tell you what experience I did have, a little different from bikes being everywhere, is my dad had a landscape and lawn care business. Mm. And he and I lived in an apartment for a while. And when you're living in an apartment and you're doing lawn care, you can't leave all the stuff out in the truck.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So the lawnmowers would come inside. If anybody thinks sometimes it seems like I don't have a couple of brain cells, I'm just telling you, inhaling gasoline on a regular basis is probably bad for you.
Probably.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
But yeah. So I would much rather be tripping over bikes than lawnmower. Sorry, Dad, if you're out there listening.
Yeah, all right.
He doesn't listen to podcasts. I'm good. This will be the one. We really haven't talked about GORP yet. Mm-hmm. That's the Greenhouse Outdoor Recreation Program through the University of Arkansas, but the program is here in Bentonville. Of course, you were part of GORP's fall 2022 cohort. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Will you share with the audience, I guess, from your perspective, what GORP is and how the accelerator helped shape Gnargo and push you forward?
Sure. You should take this one.
Okay, yeah. So the Greenhouse Outdoor Recreation Program is an accelerator put on by the University of Arkansas, and we heard about them because we're friends with Taylor at Merman Cycles.
Oh yeah,
mm-hmm. And he introduced us to Phil. And at the time, we were just making bikes in our garage because we wanted cargo bikes and couldn't afford the really high-end cargo bikes that we wanted. So we just built our own high-end cargo bikes that we mm-hmm. could afford. And we were I was working at Pedal It Forward as a volunteer, and there was a ton of bikes that were beautiful, like these beautiful Trex Giants. They were in a scrap pile, and I bought them from them and brought them home, and we started prototyping them. And Taylor saw some of the bikes we were building, and he ended up buying our first 2 bikes before we were ever even a business. And
neat.
Yeah, and he introduced us to Phil. And Phil thought that what we were doing deserved to be an LLC and deserved to get a little bit of funding and guidance, mentorship. And he was right. It was a wonderful experience that introduced us to an entire community of the ecosystem that I've learned. That's the proper name. The ecosystem of Bentonville is, it's so welcoming. And it's looking for crazy people with crazy ideas that want to bring them to life. And it's funny because outside of this community is a group of people with crazy ideas. And I keep like, just go talk to Phil. Like Phil can help you take this idea forward. So it's really been a great experience bridging that gap. But from a Gnargo perspective, having been trained in design thinking, I totally understand the importance of the voice of the customer and not only listening, but observing customers or your future target audience. And one of the things that we had not thought about at all with our designs was small footprint living situations with like college students. And we had a mentor, or I'm sorry, not a mentor, an intern that helped us do a lot of the user research on campus. We were doing research with families up in Bentonville, and she was doing it on campus in Fayetteville.
With students.
And we got a really good glimpse at what those potential customers would want out of a bike. And Gus also needed the same thing. Our 7-year-old wanted a cargo bike, and he wanted this very small footprint bike, and we ended up letting him prototype it. And he prototyped it. He collaborated with one of our fabricators to bring it to life, and then we iterated upon it to make the schoolie. And the schoolie, it took us about 6 months of development to get it to where it's at now, which is now it's our top selling bike, and it hasn't even been publicly released yet. It's just because they're showing up at bike shops. The mechanics are riding them, and then more people want them. It's become like a FUBU effect. It's really interesting. Like FUBU, the originator of FUBU had like 4 t-shirts he could buy. So he couldn't give them to LL Cool J, but he could give it to his the big bouncers around him, like the biggest billboards around LL Cool J. And so I just really like that idea of mechanics riding our bikes and then customers seeing the mechanics ride the bikes and then wanting to be on that bike because the mechanic is on it. And so I think GORP really helped us create a lot of trust within the cycling community to see that we're just out there being really curious. And
that was all just from them pushing customer discovery. Do your interviews. We had like 10 interviews we had to do a week.
Yeah.
Probably not that many, but it was a pretty big number, and it was a lot to get in just to feel out what people wanted, what problems they were having.
Talking to bike shop owners, Scott and Janine at Buddy Pegs, they were awesome to interview. Talking with people was the biggest thing. And then the funding, I'll have to say the funding was incredible because
helpful.
We were able to secure enough inventory of 10 components or 10 bikes worth of components. And, you know, the old saying, it takes money to make money. These bikes take money to make money because to build these bikes is expensive. And it allowed us the capital to buy that inventory, which was critical at that stage. And we sold those bikes. We made money in the process. We repaid our debt to ourselves with the GORP. And then we were able to just like kind of take that money and snowball it into what we're at now, which is inventory for 50.
And
Oh, that's great.
yeah, I feel like we agreed in that experience too. It felt like we were back in kind of the art school studio setting too, because we had this amazing cohort of other companies who were going through the same stuff that we were, very different projects, but just to have other brains and other, I don't know, like intelligences to bounce ideas off of, and like just the networking element too was really amazing.
That's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
It is really hard to beat that. In my opinion, for most accelerators, that's the thing right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The having the cohort around you, you're having these shared experiences. You're bouncing, if it's done right, you're bouncing ideas off of each other, and then getting out and talking to people, right? As Steve Blank would say, the answers are out there. They're never where you are. They're out there, no matter how much you know about your product and the problem as you see it. But I got to tell you, congratulations, because the best validation is revenue. Most people's validation is, or they think they have validation when they do customer discovery, but you don't really have validation until you get revenue.
Yeah.
So really nice job.
Well, thank you.
You know, we're really blessed to have the U of A and the GORP program here. And, you know, GORP's, I guess it's really unique in a town where there's 10 different accelerators. It's really unique in that it's focused on the outdoor industry. Will you talk about some of the other organizations and folks that have helped you out along the way?
Yeah, so we were fortunate to jump from one incubator right into the next one. So we went into Builders+Backers.
Oh, yeah.
Brought on by Heartland Forward and a bunch of other funders. But we were in the spring cohort for Builders+Backers, which was a pretty different format from what GORP was. And we're not unique in being a GORP graduate that went into it either. There's a couple other companies out there that have done both. And I think we're all like in agreement that doing GORP and Builders+Backers was a really good order, because GORP made us really get focused, get the business plan out, do the customer discovery, and then Builders+Backers is kind of built around doing an experiment you wanted to test. So we had like the broad picture from GORP, and then we could narrow in with Builders+Backers. And our experiment was really to focus on becoming locally famous, but pairing that with hitting a global customer base, global reach with social media. So we kind of did a social media campaign, but that's when we also built up our monthly family cargo bike rides. So we're doing that every third Saturday and have had amazing turnout in every place. Like, we're trying to jump around different spots in Northwest Arkansas. So really amazing turnout. Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale.
Yeah.
All the spots.
The experiment for Heartland Forward, so they also will give you some non-dilutive funding. And with the experiment, I really like having, we came to GORP with a product. GORP helped us refine that product. But then I think Heartland Forward gave us an opportunity to experiment with the brand in a way that we weren't doing before with the social media marketing. And we converted 7 sales in 7 days. And then we had to actually shut it down. Like, we can't take any more orders right now. We got to catch up. And that experiment taught me that when we hit the on button with marketing, we can create some momentum that drives the sales. And it taught us that we've got something here. There's something going on here. So it was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But what other companies have we need to shout out?
Oh my goodness, the list goes on and on.
Was really like they've helped me in Regio Baby, but we did a tall bike experience at their Ungala this year. That was just
we build
fun
tall
for
bikes
everybody.
too, so not every donor bike is worthy of the commitment it takes to make a cargo bike. Some of them will be too rusty or have a dent in them or something. And we take those and we make them into tall bikes. Neat. So tall bikes is where the most traditional tall bike is you stack two bikes on top of each other, weld them together, and then you're riding up high. And we take an opportunity to make it really creative in some situations. But the Amazium wanted us to come give donors at the Ungala a guided ride on these, and it was incredible. We had 57 folks come through, and then
some people who hadn't been on a bike in years,
Yeah.
and just like their willingness to like, okay, let's try it.
on tall bikes.
Yeah.
And then we're a little rowdy. Okay. So we've been known to bring the party. People like that Gnargo brings the party. And so we had about 8 of the Gnargo crew out there, and they were like, we're just going to ride through the Amazium. And so next thing you know, we're all riding through the Amazium on tall bikes. And Sam comes out a few minutes later, and I thought he was going to rip us. And he's like, man, you were doing such a good job of finding where my comfort zone is. And I was like, you were the most professional sounding person. And we went and did it again. We found,
Of course.
yeah.
Did you get him on the tall bike?
Well, no, he didn't get up, but he did
Sam
put
Dean,
the video.
Man, next time you're getting on the tall bike.
I agree. It was great.
That's great. Well, you know, the outdoor industry is just burgeoning in Bentonville. And I was making myself a couple of notes and thinking about, as I was thinking about it, it's not just recreation, it's outdoor recreation, but legitimately as an industry, right? It's a place where numerous outdoor companies are coming. They're establishing offices and headquarters and manufacturing. And I guess my question is, why is this, from your perspective, why is this happening so quickly? And I'll add to it, what is it about Bentonville that makes it so that established companies like Specialized and YT Bikes can come here and access their customers, but then companies like Alt-Angle and Gnargo can commercialize their products? What's happening that's so special that's making that spark?
Yeah, I love this question. I think about disruption within industries a lot. And I think direct to consumer really was a disruption within the cycling industry. And YT, I love that you brought up YT. YT was a pioneer within that space. And direct to consumer, I think, made traditional brands like Specialized kind of rethink their sales model. And also rethink the relationship with their customers. Direct to consumer showed that you can sell a bike without needing to be in a dealership, which showed that you can build trust through digital content. But then I think the next evolution of direct to consumer, the post-pandemic evolution, is experience. And I think that whenever you are building a brand that you need customers to trust, like a YT and Specialized are selling electric bikes, and we hear about bad things with electric bikes all the time. So we definitely need our customers to trust us. The best way to do that is to look not at like the Aspens of the world, but look at the most affordable vacation place within the United States that has mountain biking happening on free trails, and created an experience center. And what's going to happen is the trust with all those customers is going to skyrocket. I think it's an excellent move on both of those brands' parts to be moving here. And I expect more to be doing the same.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned another one earlier that even preceded them. You talked about your son, right? The Strider bike, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got one storefront in the world. They're either in, forgive me, Strider, either in South Dakota or North Dakota. I think they're in South Dakota, but their storefront is in Bentonville on the Bentonville Square. And we're going to keep seeing just more and more of this. What advice do you have to business leaders who haven't been here to check out Bentonville yet, especially in the outdoor industry, without saying to them, what's wrong with you? What advice do you have them about how they should think about this place and what they should do next?
I think the first thing to think about when coming to Bentonville is to be humble and kind. I always listen first. And I think with a place like Bentonville, where you have so many passionate people, both with their careers, but then also with their hobbies. You, as a business leader, it's really important to hear from those customers before we go in with any kind of ego or something like that. And so to come here and to really find those community events and participate, but listen, like go in and listen and hear what the community is looking for, and then start to build something. And another thing I'll have to say is that with Walmart being here, and there's communities being built here every day. Mm-hmm. And if there's not a community that you like here today, build your own community, and you'll have a group of people within a month that you can call your own community. Mm-hmm. And I just think that is one of whenever we first came here as a family 4.5 years ago, the word attainable is what we left here thinking. Mm-hmm. And I do think that it is highly attainable when you start with listening.
That's solid advice, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
But in particular here, and you're right, if your tribe isn't here, you can get them here. First of all, just get them on the ground.
That's true.
They'll just come, right? And this, I think this is true because Bentonville is a place where work and play can be the same thing. They're so intertwined. And that makes that really easy. You can build a bike company here, right? Mm-hmm. It's perfectly natural, normal, and arguably expected to have meetings on trails.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That happens. That's legit.
Oh, it does.
You can hang out in a world-class art museum. Mm-hmm. There's so many other places you can just go and think and relax. And if you know where to go, you can even hang out at a waterfall right in the middle of town. It's mm-hmm. hidden right in the middle of town, right? And so I guess, how do you balance work and play in a place that offers both? Usually it's how do you find work-life balance, but then how do you balance work and play?
Mm-hmm. I'll start with just a funny anecdote. I think if you were to ask our friends, do we work too much? They'd say, absolutely. They are always working. If you were to ask our mentors from GORP, do they play too much? They'd say, yeah, I think they play a little too much. Yeah. So to me, listening person, I think we found a pretty good balance.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I think we also, Zach and I, as partners in crime and in a business, we balance each other out too. So Zach is very good at being able to pull away and is much more playful and definitely will get me out of the house. Like, come on, let's go ride. Let's go do this. Like, okay, we can walk away from this. And I bring the focus in, like, when we need to. Like, no, we really got to get this done. So we definitely balance each other out, but we are matched in drive in like whatever direction we're going. And then we have our 2 kids who are just there to inspire. Yes. Like, hey, you guys need to do something with us. And we're like, yes, we do. Let's go. And like, we're always up for a creative moment in time.
Oh, that's cool. Well, it says a lot that your kids think that way too, right? It says a lot about you too. So that's cool. We've got a 3-year-old boy at home, and he's kind of wired the same way. Like, he reminds mm-hmm. us it's time to go do something. Mm-hmm. And just love that. You can each tell me a story. You can tell one story. Take your pick. But will you tell me, make it these stories or the story a hashtag because Bentonville story? And that's something that happened where you look at it later and you go, that could only happen in Bentonville, or maybe it describes the essence of the place.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll start because I know you've got a more like focused story, but I couldn't isolate a time in Bentonville experiences. It's more like an all-around, I guess, experience of going through the town on a bike and having so many familiar faces and people to wave to and smile at and say, hey, how's it going? Like, I have never lived anywhere that has had that before. I've lived in a lot bigger metropolitan areas mm-hmm. where the density is hard to like know people everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. But I love that about Bentonville, is just having this community that you like recognize everywhere you go. It doesn't matter if you're going to the grocery store or dropping kids off somewhere, but like people are out and engaged in their community. And I love that about Bentonville. And that's so much of what makes it attainable too, because you are part of the community that you are building, and you are out in it. And I love that.
I love that, because there's a lot of 60,000 person communities where you can still not see the people that are your tribe, or where people aren't out and about because people are inside, but here everybody is out and they're doing things. My brother-in-law remarked on this. He's like, my God, everybody's out walking and riding their bikes and outdoors. What is going on in this place? And so, I think you're right. That's very much a Bentonville thing.
Well, there's a lot of energy and programming and money going into like, it's Ride to Work Wednesday today. Like, excellent. Let's have another day that we can just show up in one spot and celebrate being together and being outside and being on a bike. Like I've not lived anywhere that has that kind of thing on a day-to-day basis.
Nice.
Yeah. But do you want to share? Yeah. This is good too.
Well, I wanted to add to that last piece about like when the kids are pulling us away, we'll end up going somewhere. I could leave my phone. We were joking about this, like leaving our phones behind, because when we get to that place with the kids, guarantee you there's going to be somebody that we could talk about cargo bikes, or there's just like constantly someone at these places that we know that want to know more about Gnargo, or that want some mentorship on their own aspirations. And I just think that that's a because Bentonville moment so often for me. But the story that I think is, I had a couple stories, but depending on when this releases, the one story that I'll share is at Bike Fest. So Bike Fest, the weekend of Bike Fest, we live half a mile from where Bike Fest was.
Nice.
And we were the pre-game house before, and parking. People could park at our house, and we had tall bikes. We have what we call a tall bike library. It's about 10 bikes deep of tall bikes.
That's cool.
And people would just take our tall bikes into the festival, and then they would ride them through the festival. Next thing you know, we're getting invited to the after party. And so that night we were scrambled. We got some childcare, and that night we showed up to the after party, and it wasn't on the dance floor. Elysia was, and I'm watching from a balcony, and a few guys come out. We start talking, and the next thing you know, they're pulling up another guy from the balcony below, just like a couple guys would. And we start talking about our week leading up to this, and these guys were just coming from France. And the guy that had just been pulled up was someone that did this BMX move. And these were the two announcers that were announcing it. And I thought this BMX move, earlier in the week, I saw it, and I thought, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And now I'm talking to the guy on the back porch of someone's house. It was the craziest thing ever. And it was, but it was one of those experiences where I always heard, like, he puts on his pants the same way you do,
Yeah.
And I just loved it. I thought it was a really wonderful experience, and I wanted to share it for this for sure.
That's a great story. Well, as we start wrapping up this last section, call it the third chapter of the podcast, this last section is randoms and advice questions. But the first one is, if somebody wants to invest in a Gnargo bike or reach you to or learn more about Gnargo, how do they do that?
I think I can address the camera on this one. Check out our Instagram account. That's probably where we're most active in terms of posting fun videos. There's customer videos and lots of sharing there at Gnargo Bike Co. We also have a TikTok at the same account. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, kind of all the social media, we're on it. And then we are in the process of doing a complete overhaul of our website, but that's gnargobikeco.com.
Yeah, keep an eye out for the launch of the new website for sure. It's going to be happening probably around December, and we're going to have a build your bike feature. So really customization. Really cool. It's going to be a really great experience, and hopefully we can bring the customers along the fabrication experience as well. So really excited about that.
Very cool. Hey, let's go to a random. If you could name your first Gnargo prototype after a movie, what would the movie name be?
I think we came down to, let's see, The Breakfast Club. And it kind of dates us as being I think the new term for us is the geriatric millennial. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
But that's kind of
from
when we were
Gen Xer,
born.
and it could be worse.
Generational wars. It's what
about
we
the
can
same.
call each
You're
other.
basically Gen X.
Yeah.
Which means you're cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure.
All right, good.
Well, I'll take it.
Okay, The Breakfast Club.
The Breakfast Club. Why The Breakfast Club? This is something that is like an ethos of Gnargo that is hard to nail down in description, but it's this essence of like punk rock, but also like inclusivity, because we are all and we are none at this, like we are everything at the same time. And we all have our own stories, but come together and kind of relate at our like basic level. And I think that's kind of what Gnargo is here to serve, is we want to be accessible to everybody. We want to be visible. We want good representation on our bikes of all peoples. And I don't know, I think the Breakfast Club is kind of a washover version of that, but an easy one to name anyway.
Well, that's a pretty solid one.
Yeah. Having a group of, you would think from the outside, like much different personalities, and they come together in a very youthful, energetic, curious way, and then they leave as friends, still being youthful and chaotic. And I just think that's what we started our first prototype with. And it wasn't because we were trying to solve a problem of, high quality bikes at a great value, but we were just trying to solve something that we wanted in our own lives.
Like, how can we commit to just riding our bikes as much as we can?
Yeah.
We did it.
That's cool. Well, let's stick with the bike theme. If you were a bike part,
Yes.
what part of the bike would you be?
I'm all you take.
Yeah,
this.
no, I this is awesome. So I'm going to answer this honestly, but it's going to sound like a shameless plug. So I apologize ahead of time, but let's just imagine you're like a early 90s Trek, mid to high quality bike, and you're getting sold to an 18-year-old going off to college. You get to take that kid through college into a career, maybe a bike commuter, maybe not. The bike goes into storage, finds its way after a years or a decade to a community bike shop, and then it gets picked up by Gnargo. And Gnargo takes that frame. So in this story, I'm the bike frame. Okay, so the bike frame gets reimagined. It gets to serve a new family hauling their most precious cargo.
Nice.
And, it just that reinvention along the way. I want to be that bike frame. That bike frame, I think, is the luckiest bike frame around.
That is a cool answer. I love it. That is so cool. Well, if you could load up the two of you a couple of Gnargos and load it up with some gear to sustain yourself for a little bit and bike anywhere in the world, where would that be?
I got that. This has been a dream of mine for like years. And that would be a cargo bike tour of kind of the origin of cargo bikes. So Denmark, Sweden,
Nice.
the Netherlands, Germany, just where they have that bike infrastructure as really the basis of society. It almost seems like there's just so much energy around bikes and not cars, and foot transportation and not cars. And to be able to see how they've done that and really experience the culture that is very bike centric, love to do that. On our bikes too. I'd love to be like, oh, we got Gnargo bikes,
sure.
and be able to share out.
That's neat. Let's see, for the sake of time, I'm trying to decide which one of these last two questions I'm going to ask you.
You're not going to ask the circularity question?
Oh, yeah.
Man, I
Tell me
was
about
ready
why
for
that.
that one.
Yeah, let's
He's
hear
gotta
about
take
that.
this one.
Talk about the circular supply chain, because that is important. Why is the circular supply chain so important?
Yeah, so I have spent a bit of time within retail, and circularity is something that we talk a lot about with, regeneration, circularity. These are big goals, lofty goals. And having spent some time around merchants at a big retailer down the street, all of these conversations end up with a cost increase. And I was so tired of hearing that. And I think one of the most beautiful things about Bentonville is that you can lead by example here. And you can be a small little bike company, but have a pretty big voice.
Yeah.
And I, at the time, was volunteering at Pedal It Forward. And like I said, we were seeing these bike frames not getting used. And we decided that instead of building this brand on a sourcing model of importing just new frames that are getting, you're just adding to a conversation of a disposable culture. And I think that the prototypes that we built were like, well, we built those for super cheap. Why couldn't we build production for, put more quality into it? We could powder coat these frames. We could hire a TIG welder. We can do these things. And we could offer a great savings to our customers with excellent components at just a shocking value. And why not do that? Like, we are not this Titanic ship right now that can't, turn left or right. We are not even swimming yet. So I think that with the circularity, the importance for us is that within circularity, you have a trust within the system. Where today within recycling, I don't think the trust is there. There's a huge demand for like post-consumer grade plastics to be put into packaging and products, but the input's not there because a lot of folks don't trust that their milk carton is actually getting recycled. And what's the point? And maybe they don't wash the milk out of it, and maybe it's not actually recyclable when it gets there. And so there's this trust factor, there's an education piece, but there's, at the core of it, I think it's a customer that doesn't see themselves within the supply chain. And I think when you can put yourself in the supply chain and you're also receiving savings at the same time, like, I don't want to deposit back for a bottle can. I just want my soap pods to be cheaper. At the end of the day, I want all of my products to be helping me live a low cost of living. And I think circularity is the path. But right now the conversation is about how much money is it going to cost to move this Titanic ship to the left. And but being founders of a startup, we didn't have that problem. So we got to start it from the foundation. And I do think that starting with classic frames adds this like nostalgia piece for a lot of people. And it's a new service we're going to start offering where we can have people bring their bike frame in from when they were in college that they've never wanted to get rid of because they love that bike. It's a really tough thing. Yeah. And add a new life to it and let maybe their son take it to college as a cargo bike or something. But yeah, it's all about building trust, reducing cost, and adding sustainability to the like supply chain itself. With 240 community bike shops supplying us with frames, there's a resilience there where you're not relying on a single overseas supplier to give you exactly what you want. And that communication, that language gap, all those things, it doesn't happen. It's just, I think it's a beautiful like way to start the company, and I'm really, really proud of that part of it.
I love that. That's one of my favorite things about new companies is you're just not constrained.
Yes.
If folks see that as a constraint in and of itself, right? I don't have any resources. I don't have these. No, it means you actually get to think differently. and try things that other folks cannot do.
Yes.
So it's a beautiful place to be in. But this is such a good message you ended with. That's such a good message. I think we'll finish questions there.
Okay.
And hey, Zach, Elysia, thank you all for spending time with me and the Bentonville Beacon audience today. This has been a fascinating conversation. Awesome. I got to tell you, when we moved here, I didn't own a bike and had not been on a bike in a long time, of course. So I bought a mountain bike naturally. And of course, my son since gotten a Strider bike, and I promised my wife I would only buy one bike. But now I'm thinking about an electric cargo bike. Awesome. Here we are. So we'll see where that goes. But I feel like that needs to be part of my, well, if you have two, you have a collection, right?
Well, reach out to us for a test ride. Anybody out there, reach out to us for a test ride. We'd love to get you on one.
Cool. Maybe I can get my wife on a bike.
Heck yeah.
I think I'm in full support of that.
That would be cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining me in the audience today.
Thank you so much, James.
Thanks for having us.
You bet. So thank you to the Bentonville Beacon audience. Without you, this show would not be possible, or it actually wouldn't have a purpose. So will you take a moment to share Elysia and Zach and Gnargo's story? Go ahead right now and link it to your friends and colleagues through social media, email, however you'd like. And of course, as always, keep coming back to learn more about the entrepreneurs, business executives, and community leaders who are sparking the rise of Bentonville, Northwest Arkansas, this place where you get more of what you want and less of what you don't. For all of our episodes, check them out at bentonvilleeconomicdevelopment.com or on your favorite podcast player, where, of course, you will hit that subscribe button. Thanks. We'll see you next time.